Good evening, everyone. Welcome to War Resistance Poetry, a reading and book talk with Mee Choi. I'm Seon Gang, a researcher and podcaster based in Cologne, Germany. Our guest today, Mee Choi, is the author of DMZ Colony, Hardly War, The Morning News is Exciting, and several other chapbooks and essays. What fascinates me the most is that she works across boundaries of various media. Mee Choi not only wrote poems for her book Hardly War, but also performed them in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Berlin. And last year, she exhibited on installation based on her another book, DMZ Colony, at DAAD Gallery Berlin as well. As poet and translator, Mee Choi has won several internationally renowned prizes and fellowship, including 2021 MacArthur Fellowship, Guggenheim Fellowship, 2020 National Book Award for Poetry, 2019 Griffin International Poetry Prize for Translation, and DAAD Artists-in-Berlin Fellowship, to name but a few. And just yesterday, British Royal Society for Literature awarded her with International Writers Program as well. Mee Choi is this year's Picador Professor for Literature at University of Leipzig. The Picador Guest Professorship for Literature brings leading English language writers to Leipzig University's American Studies program to teach in the fields of creative writing and literary studies. The project is based on a partnership between Holzbrinck Berlin, the German Academic Exchange Service, or DAAD, and the University of Leipzig. Next to their teaching at American Studies Leipzig, Picador guest professors share their work and expertise with the broader public in readings and other forums that address the potentials of literature for our contemporary society. I'm sure that you are all thrilled about meeting her right now. And let me introduce Mee Choi to you. Hi, Mee.
Hi, good to see you.
So good to see you.
Thank you so much for the introduction.
Thank you for being here tonight with us. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
And how's your time in Leipzig?
It's really nice. I'm really enjoying the students. They are super smart and extremely eager to write. And so we are having really interesting conversations as well.
All right, maybe we can hear more about that right after your reading. May I? Yeah. So I think you are ready, and the stage is all yours now.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to start reading from my book, Hardly War. And I just want to say just a few words about these two photographs. One on the left is by my father. He used a self-timer to take that photograph, and he's standing. He's on the left with his two colleagues, and they're standing on Taedong River Bridge in Pyongyang, North Korea, about October of 1950. So that's just a few months after the Korean War started. And then the photo on the right is the same bridge that was taken by a different photographer, Max Desfor, and that was taken in December of 1950. A little glossary. Mee, cook. Su, cook. Mu, cook. Hwa, cook. Cook. Beauty, cook. Hydrangea, cook. Radish, cook. Flower, cook. Love, cook. Mugunghwa, 5 petals. 무궁화 꽃이 피었습니다. 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 1, 2, 3, 4, O, mu. Il, I, sam, sa, o, kum. Il, I, sam, sa, o, hwa. Il, I, sam, sa, o, su. Il, I, sam, sa, o, kuk. I refuse to translate. 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 Oh, over. I'm going to skip to a poem about South Korea's role in the Vietnam War. From 1965 to 1970, South Korea sent its troops to support the US efforts in the Vietnam War. And in return, it received about $1 billion. And that was, at that time, was extremely critical for South Korea. And it basically funded South Korea's industrial development. And so I begin with, it's a homophonic poem. So I'm using the place names where South Korean troops have committed massacres. Neo-colonies, colony. You provide the prose poems, I'll provide the war. I, sir. Me, translate, sir. Me bin Thai, me bin there, sir. Me bin Hua, me bin Hai, sir. Me dia nin fuok bin, me 99 bao bao, sir. Me go die, me good dad, sir. Me ha me hate milk, sir. Me fong ni and fong nut. Me flunky and fuck that, sir. Me tay vin, me terrible, sir. Me vin chuan, me VC, no, sir. Me tiger, sir. Me ow. Kitty stew. Under the starry night. Why, it's practically a jungle. Hello, fatty. Hello, kitty. Meow, I love spam. Spam patties, browned in lard or Crisco, leftover sour kimchi. Don't be a pussycat. Jungle water. Boil, boil. Yummy. Miss you, mommy. Oh, tremor, tremor. Going from a lying or sitting position to a standing position. Are you okay or okay? I'm dreaming of a white Christmas just like the ones I used to know, sir. Mugunhwa, sir, white horse, sir, blue dragon, sir. May all your Christmases be white, sir, walking, crawling, or growing. Children listen where the treetops glisten. Search and destroy, said Suguk. Chorus of O. Oh, dream, no face, just a wide open belly. Oh, fetus in the split womb. Oh, cut off the baby cord. Oh, war, breast cut out and woman shot by ROK Marines. Oh, US Marines transport her to the hospital but she died soon. Oh, war executed young women's bodies. Oh, jungle leaves. Oh, pregnant woman's forehead blown off. Oh, fetus, all alone. Oh, dream, tiger teeth, scrambled. Oh, parade of operations. Oh, bonuses. Operation Flying Tiger, sir. going to then now read from DMZ Colony. We'll just start with the first section, Sky Translation. The Korean Demilitarized Zone is approximately 160 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. The DMZ runs across the 38th parallel, a division created after World War II with the end of the 35-year-long Japanese occupation of Korea. The US occupied the south and the Soviet Union the north. The US still occupies South Korea with military installations, bases, and troops. The Korean border is one of the most militarized borders in the world. On February 23rd, 2018, the day of my poetry reading with Daniel Bosutsky at the Pulitzer Arts Foundation, I walked across Forest Park in St. Louis, Missouri. I was heading toward the St. Louis Art Museum. I heard a kind of muted, distant calling, a polyphony of cries. Because I had never heard the flock calls of snow geese before, I was baffled by the flood of sound, seemingly from nowhere and everywhere. Instinctively, I turned my head from side to side, then up. My head tilted back, triggered vertigo, a common symptom of Meniere's disease. My ears flapped about dizzyingly like a sparrow and followed the migrating snow geese above. The geese promptly instructed me a chorus. Return, 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 return. Return, 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 return. Return, 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 return. Then they flew even higher out of my ear's reach. The snow geese must have felt sorry for the homesick sparrow from a faraway place, for they dropped me a little line from the sky. See you at DMZ. Alone again, I could only chirp to myself. Translator for hire, hire, hire me. That photo is of Mr. An Haksab, who I interviewed. Mr. An was a political prisoner from 1953 to 1995. He currently lives in a farming village within the civilian control zone on the South Korean side of the DMZ. To enter the DMZ village near the city of Gimpo, west of Seoul, I had to pass a guard post manned by young soldiers. I also observed seemingly endless barbed wire fencing across the rice fields. An, now in his 80s, remains a North Korean sympathizer. Every time a missile is test-fired in North Korea, usually before or after the massive biannual joint US and ROK military exercises, An is placed under house arrest. I recorded An and also scribbled in my notebook while listening to his life story at his house on December 23rd, 2016. I remain a daughter of Neo Colony. Torture, indiscriminate beatings. For instance, if you drop your chopsticks or rice ball, what's that signal? What's that code? They beat the shit out of us. They demanded meaning, yet meaningless. It was impossibly absurd. For instance, If you accidentally dropped your wooden pillow at night, you signaled. This comrade of mine was too frail. I said I was the one. These guys still use the Japanese word for shotgun. My arms were not long enough for a loop, for a shotgun to be tied. So they did it this way. For instance, a neo-colonial code. For instance, an anti-neo-colonial code. For instance, impossibly a loop, impossibly a ribbon, impossibly neo-colonial. For instance, indiscriminate signs, meaning, Mr. An. For instance, a few drops of urine, impossibly coded. Then terror came. We were side by side, squeezed into one another. The person behind you had to lean against the wall. Then you leaned against him, and the person in front could only sit on your lap. That is how we slept, like spoons, like bean sprouts. Then terror came. Pak Chung-hee came. Error, to be exact. Then we leaned against him like spoons, like bean sprouts. Then the task force came. Central intelligence, police, pastors, educators, operators of ideology, to be exact. We never lost any debates with the task force. Operators of, like bean sprouts of. We knew our position economically, politically, theoretically. Therefore, terror came. You stand up to use the toilet and they beat you for standing up without permission. We were transferred from prison to prison. Operators of spoons, bean sprouts, beat. Then everyone came. Then terror. Then Korea. Then we knew. G-H. Ro. Te-ro. Toward global humanity. The End of a Nation. On July 2nd, 2018, my flight took me to Marfa, Texas, not my usual migratory route. Nevertheless, during my brief stay, I was able to meet swallows and sparrows, and I observed other exceptional migratory wings from Mexico. Some small winged children were captured and separated from their parents and placed in concentration camps along the border of Texas, US, and Mexico. Who would translate their wings? Whenever my ears would let me, I looked up at the night skies in order to track Planet 9. Being the compulsive translator that I am, I traced and traced the planet's orbitary routes, its rotations of capture, torture, and massacre. The universe is such a dizzying place that my ears were spinning out of control. Planet 9. Come in, Planet 9. The language of capture, torture, and massacre is difficult to decipher. It's practically a foreign language. What a nightmare. But as a foreigner myself, I'm able to detect the slightest flicker of palpitations and pain. Difficult syntax. It may show up as faint dots and lines, but they're often blood, snow, and even dandruff. How do I know? Foreigners know. An Kim calmly narrated as she continued to circle and circle Planet 9 with a pen. Her circles were extraordinary. I'm going to read 2 poems from the Orphans series. 8 girls survived the Sancheong Hamyang massacre, which took place in the southern province of South Korea in 1951. It was an anti-communist genocide. Orphan Kim Jong-nam. My little brother came home barefoot, covered in blood. He got out alive from the mass grave. He said, "I stepped on dead bodies. The grave filled with blood." I asked, "Did our parents run away without us?" "No, they're all dead." He screamed and screamed. I didn't believe him. "No, they'll come back alive." Our big sister hid my brother under her skirt and sat on him to keep him alive. He screamed and screamed. I could only grab a clump of mother's hair. I couldn't put out the flames. Father sizzled and crackled. My brother screamed and screamed. In a dream, I chew and chew mother's hair. Orphan Kim Kapsun. 빨갱이 할머니, 빨갱이 할아버지, 빨갱이 논두렁, 빨갱이 엄마, 빨갱이 치마, 빨갱이 아버지, 빨갱이 낫, 빨갱이 언니, 빨갱이 동생, 빨갱이 오빠, 빨갱이 조카, 빨갱이 아기, 빨갱이 친구, 우린 다 반동새끼. Mirror words come out of my thoughts about translation. Translation is a mode because translation is an anti-neocolonial mode. I obsess about all the words that are given in our society. In 1945, it took less than 30 minutes for all the words to be carried out to divide the country I was born in along the 38th parallel north. All the words compel division, war, and obedience around the world, but other words are possible. Translation as an anti-neocolonial mode can create other words. I call mine mirror words. Mirror words are meant to compel disobedience, resistance. Mirror words defy neocolonial borders, blockades. Mirror words flutter along borders and are often in flight across oceans, even galaxies. Mirror words are homesick. Mirror words are halo. Mirror words are orphaned words. Now look at your words in the mirror. Translate. Translate. Did you? Do it again. Do it. Ruoi yenelekse si ti laitram wal rona elbate growth nu nozel. Ruoi yenelekse ere si nu ud na. Ruoi yenelekse era uoi ivila si nuk ivila natup notan era uoi ivila kak ha ke nyong im ni ka. Sky similes for snow geese. Kiok. Return. Black-faced spoonbill, return. Kiok. Hid. Return. Red-crowned crane, return. Kiok. Ye. Return. White-naped crane, return. Eared. Or. Sparrow, what took you so long? Meat. Reared. Yaw. During the Korean War, cranes had no place to land. Eat, E, north, south, north. Piet, neat, E, dead, dead, dead. Giat, sky, sky, sky. In reality, we were all angels from DMZ. We too mingled, laughed, and played under the skies of Panmunjom. Listen, angels, we are the orphans who aren't orphans. We are the obtuse, the third meaning, the passage from language to insignificance, to eternity, to colony, halo to halo, hand to hand. We wave. Hello, angels. Dear angels, I speak to you today about the importance of nation. A nation that's not a nation. The American-backed angel of genocide has departed to Hawaii. Farewell forever. Now we must address our eternity of obelisk, our eternity of oblong, our eternity of war. Are we orphans of beauty? Are we angels of eternity? Who are we, really? Your Excellency, is it martial law? Is it of grave significance? Is it written in a foreign language? Your Excellency, no translators are currently available. I squat beneath you. My film, a signifier without a signified. The American cabinet has no tolerance for foreign words. We, the nameless. Who are you? We are the angels of America. Who are you? We are the angels of America. We bow to no one in particular. Our vowels are incomprehensible. Only the consonants pass from hand to hand, colony to colony. We cheer, we weep. We are E. We are E. We are eternally motherless. We are your orphans. We are your angels. We are your mirror words. What's written on paper is obvious. See you at DMZ. Thank you.
Thank you, Domi, for taking us with you through your poems. Although we cannot see the reaction from the audience, I'm pretty sure that lots of people are having very, I think a moment for themselves right now, because that's what poems are also for. And I also don't really want to break this silence or the moment that all of us are now having, but still I also have lots of impressions and also lots of questions to you. So let me just start with questions about your work in general. So you published these 2 books in recent years, and how did you start with these projects of DMZ Colony and, but before DMZ Colony, Hardly War?
So Hardly War came after my first book, The Morning News is Exciting. And I actually attended a music concert by a German composer. He's an experimental music composer, Heiner Goebbels. Maybe you know of his work. But he composed a piece called Songs of Wars I Have Seen. And he used Gertrude Stein's text from her book, Wars I Have Seen. So when I was listening to his music and listening to also the musicians actually read from Gertrude Stein's book, it just sort of occurred to me, right, during that time that while I was there, that, I should write about all the wars my father has photographed. Um, it took a long time, but it finally sort of, finally kind of dawned on me how much of my life, how much of my father's life has been about, witnessing and photographing wars in Asia, mostly in Asia. And these are all wars waged by the US. And that is basically how he supported us. So my life is also very entangled, with what he has seen and photographed. And that's what I grew up seeing. I saw more of his photographs than my father. And so that's how Hardly War began. And then so I just sort of wanted to start with the Korean War because both of my parents lived through the war and survived it. And then the second book, the DMZ Colony, I first wanted to after the war, covering the war, I wanted to sort of write about the military dictatorship periods, the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So that's sort of how this whole project began. And I'm working on the third book in the trilogy.
As you explained us that the first project, not the first project, but the Hardy War, came from the experience of attending a concert, which was based on the book of Gertrude Stein. It kind of relates to your own work as translator, because the concert itself was based on a book, and then it was translated into the music, and then you attended the concert, and then you then again translated it into your words. It's not exactly the way I was thinking about the book's genealogy, but it makes also sense because as I first opened your book and watched it, I had the impression that I was looking at an exhibition, not a book or not an catalog for an exhibition, because catalog is a documentation exhibition. But I'm sure that some of the audience already also bought your books and also read them. But it's very special because for me, they are the exhibition. And as I read that you already made an installation around your book, DMZ Colony, it totally made sense for me. So was it intended? I'm not only meaning the design of the book, but also just the I don't know. I cannot really explain it better. It was just like going through an exhibition. The reading your book was, So what?
That's great,
Yeah.
that experience. Because while I was writing Hardly War, I was kind of imagining how I could do an installation of this book. How I might project some photographs and maybe even poems, that I might make paper dresses that I sort of make reference to in the book. And because I actually studied visual arts, not poetry, so I started with visual art first. Then I sort of kind of gradually moved on to poetry while I was translating. So I am a very visual person to begin with. And then I, once I started writing, I realized the book is such a great, beautiful, yet such economical medium. So I wanted, my books to be like art, like an art object. And I want, when you open it, that, it would be, so you will have that kind of experience as looking at art. And so when I came to Berlin 2019, I discussed with the current director of Artists-in-Berlin program, DAAD, Sylvia Fairman. And I expressed my interest in maybe doing kind of an exhibition around the book, DMZ Colony. Then she told me that there was a former fellow, a Russian artist, Ilya Kabakov. He had an exhibition at the old DAAD gallery called Exhibition of a Book. So that's how we sort of titled, DMZ Colony Exhibition of a Book. And I just sort of, we blew up some of the images, and I wanted the book to be experienced in a kind of a spatially. So that was very special. That happened. And it happened
very
just
sad that I'm very sad that I missed the exhibition because I've been in Germany. But at the same time, I can somehow imagine that, well, it's definitely a different exhibition, but somehow, because reading your book itself is for me like visiting an exhibition. So I feel that I didn't miss everything. Maybe it's just my impression. Maybe there is another exhibition of your books. And you just explained that you started studying visual arts. How come you started writing poems?
I started writing as I was working on short experimental films. I started working with 8mm and 16mm, and I wanted to have some like voiceover narrative to, and what I wrote turned out to be poems. And then I didn't write for a long time. And then when I began to translate contemporary Korean feminist poets, I started, poems, poetry came back to me. So I started writing alongside, translation while I was translating too. And I didn't really intend to even publish my first book. It just sort of happened. I just wrote and, submitted some poems to journals. And then the Action Books is a small press in the US. They published my translations of Kim Hyesoon's poetry. They were such big supporters of her work. And then they kept asking me if I finished my manuscript. And I didn't know how to even put together a manuscript at that time. So when I had 48 pages, I looked up somewhere that the full book length book has to be 48 pages. So once I had 48 pages, I just put it together and sent it to them, and that's how my first book was published.
In the 48 pages, including already pictures and images, or were there just words
my
at that
first
time?
book didn't have any visual elements.
Well, I would love to read that too, because I just finished reading 2 of your books and I'm very excited. And maybe we can move on to talk about each of your books and each of your poems.
Okay.
So today you read out of 2 books. The first one was Hardly War, and the second one was DMZ Colony. I have to admit that I cried a lot while reading your books, so it took me a lot of times too. But I'm kind of proud that I finished reading them. I'm very happy that I did that, and also have lots of questions. Let's go to a little glossary. The first one you read out of your book, Hardly War. You introduced us picture of your father who worked as war photographer already before the liberation of Korea from Japan's colonial rule, but also after that. He worked as war photographer in Korean War, also later than in Vietnam War. And what struck me the most about this book was the use of many different languages. So we both speak Korean as our mother language or our first language. And you use simple Korean words to develop very different and very unexpected meanings and connotations. And for example, 미국, it's a Korean word for the United States, and it's a Sino-Korean word that means mi means beauty or beautiful, and guk is the nation. So literally, it'll be a beautiful nation. At the same time, you become aware of this similarity because between me in Korean and then me in American language as the pronoun. And Guk is also the derogatory term for people of Asian descent. How come those kind of associations to you, and do you remember the moment that you made such discoveries?
Yes, so I was playing with. I wanted to do translingual puns, just a way of maybe subverting, words, that racial slur such as "cook," which was first used in the Philippines during the Spanish-American War, and then it was used in the Korean War, and then it became mostly widely known during the Vietnam War. So then I was playing with how it sounds like cook in Korean as nation, and also like soup, and so I was being very playful with it as a way of kind of subverting that word, sort of retranslating that word. And then like you said, that me means beautiful, so I also play with that beauty, equals nation as well. So I just wanted to sort of open the book with that, as a kind of a signal that I am going to be playing with sounds, and I'm going to be playing with translingual puns, and also I introduce the flower mugunghwa, which is a rose of Sharon, which is the national flower of South Korea, which has 5 petals. So I also play with that as well. Not in a very patriotic way, but I just wanted that sound O, number 5. That whenever you heard O in English, then people will, then the reader or would know that I'm really also, that there is that double meaning. The O is the 5 petals, which referring to the nation state, a flower that represents a nation state of Korea.
Let's move on to the next poem, 무궁화 꽃이 피었습니다, or A Rose of Sharon is Bloomed. As you explained, you are playing with Korean words and also American words or English words, and especially O, number 5 in Korean. This resembles also the sound of astonishment sometimes. In the poem 무궁화 꽃이 피었습니다, first I was very I was very impressed the way how you use Korean language and also the numbers and then English, and then also this playing with words. But there was a moment that I opened the book and just looked at it from a distance, and I found something. Maybe I'm overinterpreting something or everything, because in the page you can see a picture of a girl and a brother on her neck. And the page is designed in such a way that it looks like, to me, that looks like a tank from above, from a bird's perspective. And also the use of numbers in poems and the repeating words kind of reminded me of Isang, a Korean modernist poet of early 20th century. And then the poem ends with all over. And it made me believe that something happened around this poem, and that all over maybe is an indication that something happens to the orphan kids too. Maybe it's also concrete poetry, but yeah, could you tell me how did you start writing this poem? What was your thinkings behind it?
Yeah, actually, I didn't intend it as a concrete poetry, but I did intend it as, very visual. I just wanted to be laid out exactly like this. And I used that photograph of the girl and her brother that she's carrying. That's sort of the very typical way children used to, women and children used to carry the toddlers and babies. And I used to carry my younger brother like that. So when you Google Korean War, that is the photograph that comes up the most. So then I wanted to use that image that perhaps that's very well known, and then also just sort of start playing with that too. And because she's she's a girl, and then I use my own photograph, my childhood photograph, sort of as a kind of as a way to mirror that photo, that photograph of the girl in front of the tank. And I don't know, it just sort of it just that 무궁화 꽃이 피었습니다, which is the game that Korean children play. So that came to me, and then it was perfect because I had already mentioned Rose of Sharon earlier in the beginning. So then I thought, okay, I will just repeat that 5 times, like the 5 petals, and then establish that sound, the number. The O in Korean is same thing as O, and then so that's what happened.
There is also a question from an audience member, and also it connects connects to the question that I wanted to ask you, because especially the book Hardly War is full of flowers. Although you're talking about Korean War atrocities, war orphans, and then later also massacre in Vietnam War done by American, also Korean soldiers. So the question of beauty and the brutalness of political conflict, armed conflict, are tightly connected in your book. At the same time, in your next book, DMZ Colony, the DMZ itself is one of the most militarized borders in the world, but it is also, ironically, known to be an ecological sanctuary. So how to say that environment is important to your poetry?
I mean, I did research about that, the DMZ sanctuary, that it is it became an ecological sanctuary. And I did look into, what kind of birds that live there. Because once I started thinking about the snow geese, and I just wanted to see what kind of migratory birds might be at DMZ, and what they might have gone through during the war too, because the DMZ area was the feeding ground for many of these cranes. And so then I start to think, like, so what did they do during that endless bombing that took place during 3 years? I mean, during this Korean War, the U.S. dropped probably, far more incendiary bombs, even compared to Vietnam War. So I just sort of, then I start to think, like, where did these birds go? So that's sort of part of, that's what I was also thinking about in the poem Sky Similes. But I think that I don't really I don't think of nature and environment, separately from separately from this historical context. So they're very much part of that exploration for me.
Yeah, that's an aspect that most of us don't realize in the first sight, because it's a human-made war. It's war between human beings and war between nations. But as you said, it also has a great impact on the nature as well. So, and the next poem on in the collection of the Hardy War is also adopting some animal symbols like white horse and blue dragon, which were all names of Korean troops sent to the Vietnam War. And you also presented us a picture that your father took in the war, Korean soldier proudly presenting the tiger that he captured in Vietnam. Is it?
Actually, it's not my father's photo.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he actually never came across. I guess, fortunately, in some ways, that he did not come across South Korean troops while he was working in while he was photographing and filming in Vietnam. So I found that on South Korean Vietnam veterans website.
And this picture is very symbolic to me and also very ironic at the same time, because Koreans love to imagine themselves as the nation of tiger. There used to be a lot of tigers before the 20th century, before the colonizers came to and hunted down every tigers. So until today, there are people who are very sad about tigers. I'm very sad too. What happened to tigers in Korea? At the same time, we see here that, the generation which very likely went through the colonial rule in Korean War, well, they're happy to present themselves as the warriors who captured the tiger in another country. This is bitterly ironic. And also, you also mentioned that in Korean narrative or in Korean reasoning, well, Vietnam War mostly meant economic prosperity for Korean people of the time. I'm teaching Korean history in the university, and when I look at sources, people are also speaking about chances that Vietnam War brought to Korea. It's an economic boom. So, as a person who experienced the war through the photographs of your father, who was at the war, how did you experience the war at the time? And did this memory of the war change after the time as you revisited the photos that your father made?
I remember, my father showed some slides that he took, but they were not really about the soldiers or death. Or he also enjoyed taking photographs of just sort of just civilians at a market scene. So I remember seeing that. Women in the market. So I didn't really see, war photographs. And I don't think he really wanted to, show them to us or even think about it. And because I was a middle child, I think I was sheltered. I think that whatever stress that my father experienced, my mom was mostly impacted than my older siblings. Then by the time, it didn't really reach me that much. So I had that privilege of just sort of being able to be playful and imaginative. Like I loved imagining like what he might have seen and what other languages sound like, and what happens to people that he photographs. Where do they go, and things like that. So I was very much sheltered in that way. So I had that privilege to be more playful and imaginative. about what was really happening, and what he was really seeing. But when I actually looked more into the role that the South Korean government played in the Vietnam War, I felt like I needed to include that as part of the Korean War. I feel like that was part of a continuation. In many ways, it's a continuation of the Korean War, where South Koreans were we were so financially, economically desperate enough, and also under the politically subservient to the U.S., that we took on this role of supporting the participating in the Vietnam War and committing all these atrocities. And I don't believe that South Korea has still formally apologized. Yeah, and I think this is a part of the history that's really not still not publicly widely known or talked about. So I felt that it was important to address this, and all that atrocities that the Korean troops committed. That they have committed that during the Korean War. It's nothing new. This is just a continuation. So, yeah, that's why I wanted to add that section, and that even a neo-colony like South Korea is capable of perpetuating another kind of another kind of colonial violence.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Have you received any letters or any reactions from people of Vietnamese descent, for example, after reading your poem?
No.
Yeah, because I also have to admit that I also came across with the history very late, because in school we don't learn a lot about Korean atrocities, and I was very shocked, because I didn't have any chance to meet people from Vietnam in Korea. I somehow felt comfortable with the situation, I guess. But in Germany, people of Vietnamese descent are the biggest group of Asian people, and so I came to think about it a lot. Well, the second book of your trilogy, the DMZ Colony, keeps on asking the very heavy questions of the Cold War and its aftermath, which is also very closely connected with your personal history as migrants living in the US. And as you also mentioned, you saw the birds flying over the sky, and then you read them as a message to return and to see at DMZ. How did it come across to your mind? Was it because of its geographic location of the city that you watched the words?
Yeah, at first I didn't really know what they meant. I just took photographs quickly with my iPhone, and I just loved that. It was an incredible experience hearing them. I've never heard anything like that. Then maybe like a few months later, I looked up St. Louis, and then it turned out to be about exactly the same latitude as DMZ. That's when I knew exactly how to translate the birds, and that's when I could imagine what message they were giving me.
And then, well, DMZ is an area, it's physical space, and it's just there. It's dividing the country in two half, and we all know that. As also an audience member asked us about DMZ, what was completely unknown to me was the hardship that the long-term political prisoners in Korea went through, even after the end of the Korean War and even after the end of the Cold War. I mean, Anak-sub, he served, well, not, he's not served, he was in the prison from 1953 to 1995, which is just unbelievable. So how did you come to this story, and what was the interview like with Anak-sub?
It wasn't planned because, as I mentioned, that I wanted to look into what kind of what took place during the dictatorship era. I happen to I have a friend. I have a Korean artist friend, and her father was a doctor, and
Mhm.
in the Korean War, and she told me that her father was always arrested and under surveillance, and he was also tortured. So when I went back to South Korea in 2016, I always go, you know, meet with her, and I told her that I had just been to Gwangju just to look more into the Gwangju massacre that took place in 1980. Then she said, "Oh, maybe you want to meet with a former political prisoner that I know."
Mhm.
Um, so that's how she introduced me to him. And so I went to see him and spent about 4 or 5 hours with him. It was very intense because he was telling me everything. So I was recording um, and also taking notes at the same time. And the
Mhm.
reason why I scribbled so much in my notebook was because it was too intense, and I didn't know,
Mhm.
how to sort of. I didn't know what to do with myself while he was telling me all this, um, his experiences of torture and what he had gone through,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then that
And
those scribbles became part of my poems as well.
yeah. Um, for me, you took a very interesting approach to Anak-sub story. Well, first, you wrote um, 5 pieces about Anak-sub's personal history, but at the same time, especially the first one, Anak-sub number 1, reads almost like a script of oral history interview, which is, and you translated his Korean language into English, but except for that, you haven't altered that much about his testimony. Why is the reason behind this decision?
I didn't alter what he has told me, but I sort of had to kind of condense because it was such a
Mhm.
long. It was it was like I had 4 or 5 hours of
Mm,
material. So what I did was I selected and I pulled um, uh, things that he told me, and then sort of it was a kind of a way of condensing, sort of
mm,
distilling what he had told me, but still able to retain his voice and to be able to channel his voice. So that was sort of what I was focusing on with that piece. And in
mhm,
fact, DMZ Colony, that's a lot of what I was doing was channeling different voices, the
mhm,
voice of Anaksab, the voices of the 8 surviving girls
mhm,
from 1951. They're no longer girls, they're in the 80s and almost 90s, and some of them, a few of them have already passed away. But
mm,
sort of, I thought that the best way that I could um, talk about what took place is through by channeling the experiences
mm,
voices, whether it's
mhm,
imagined or it's just from the test the interview materials.
mhm, mhm. Just before moving on to the poems about orphans, war orphans, I have one more question. And you showed us also your scribble, what you scribbled in your notebook, among others, the word terror, which Anaksab used, and you wrote it that way. And then you also explained that it looked like GH rule. And then from this observation, you translated into toward global humanity, which made me cry really hard because it is so utterly ironic and utterly completely the opposite of what Anaksab experienced under the military dictatorship and even afterwards. Yeah.
Yes.
How did it happen?
So the way I was playing with, the word cook, so I was thinking, how can I mean, when I looked at, my what I had scribbled, it did look like letter G and H. So then how do I turn this word terror into something that, how can I subvert this? So then I can translate it into something else, something that can represent, a way to move forward. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but yeah. So and in DMZ Colony, I was also exploring many different ideas of translation. That is not just from word to word, but tracing is a form of translation, and translating from the Korean sort of era is also a form of translation. Tracing over the lines and the dots, that they could that they could form another kind of language of trauma and historical trauma and yeah.
Also, one of the impressions that I had about your poems is that, well, when we think about writing poem as choosing words, most of us are thinking about choosing beautiful words. So not very common words, but something that you don't really use much in your everyday life, but which have very poetic aura around it. And I think as a reader, I had the impression that you also chose words, but not particularly, maybe it's not an insult, but not with pretty words, but you chose words for things that cannot be spoken. And for me, it was also very intriguing to see that how you skipped the consonants in some Korean sentence. I have two questions about this kind of translational practice. First of all, how did you think about this type of translation, like skipping consonants? You cite here Kim Hye-soon's words. The second one is, why did you pick this sentence, Your Excellency, is it martial law?
Okay, so the first one, the idea about separating the consonants from the vowels come from Kim Hye-soon's idea. Anyway, so I'll just read that quote. It may be that women's or death's song is sung only in vowels without the consonants. So that gave me the idea of sort of separating out the consonants and the vowels, and to assign consonants as sort of the language of perhaps language that's associated with militarism, military violence, and power that goes from colony to colony that passes. And then the vowels only remain as a voice of those perished, perhaps. And what was the second thing again? Sorry.
I'm so sorry. I just had so many questions, but I also skipped some of your poems. So we'll go back to the poems as well. But the sentence that you use this translation as
Yeah,
skill
excellent.
or skill,
Your
Your
Excellency.
Excellency, is it martial law? Where does it come from for the audience? And why did you pick this specific sentence?
Well, in the beginning of the book, I actually talk about this photograph. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is the day of the martial law declaration in 1961 when Park Chung-hee came into power. He led a coup, and that is right in front of the old Seoul City Hall. And I anyway, so and I grew up under the midnight curfew as well when I was a child, and I thought that was like totally perfectly normal thing that all countries had this midnight curfew. Um, and so so I was thinking about the how this martial law was this sort of perpetual, it sort of we live with this martial law perpetually from actually after the Korean War, really, even. So it's been decades. Um, and then I was specifically thinking about the Gwangju massacre that was, and the main player, the person who's responsible for that is Chun Do-hwan, General Chun Do-hwan. So I was just being kind of satirical and I was sort of thinking of both, all these generals, so referring to them, Your Excellency.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not just
And
specifically Park Chung-hee or Chun Do-hwan, but
yeah.
Well, this is not exactly a question about your book, but last week Chun Do-hwan died. I'm sure that you also heard the news about his death. What came across to your mind as you first read the news?
I actually thought about that poem that I read, backwards, because I wrote that piece thinking about him and the Gwangju massacre, and the fact that he never he never apologized, and even though he was sentenced to death, he was able to still live, as a free person. And he died as a free person. And yeah, so, and we still don't know exactly, we don't have all the information about the Gwangju massacre either. I know that the US involvement in the Gwangju massacre has been uncovered through the Freedom of Information Act, with the declassified materials, but still we don't know. I mean, I think a lot of that is still suppressed. So once again, the history is being erased, and so hopefully I can address something more about Gwangju that I intended with the second book in my next book.
Yeah. Well, I cannot really say that I'm really looking forward to it because it'll be another very tearful reading experience. But still, yeah, I'll be appreciated. When we go back to the poems about the orphan children, there you explain that you first wrote the Korean version of the poem and then translate them into the English language. And doing that, you didn't and translate every and each words. You skipped some of them, or you just added something to them. But at the same time, there are words that I can see, but they don't belong neither to the Korean nor to English version. In the poem Orphan Kim Gap-sun, the one with 빨갱이 할머니, so call me grandma, call me grandpa, And the Korean version, I can read that at the very end of the poem, 엄마 배고파, so mom, I'm hungry. But you erased it out, but still I can read that. And you didn't include that in your English version of the poem. How or why did you make this decision?
Let's see. Okay, I see that. Yeah, I didn't want it to be exactly the same because translations are never the same. But that one particularly, I sort of intentionally just, well, what happened was I thought I would just kind of go on with, mommy, I'm hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a child would say, I think. Or that I would say. And then, but I immediately remembered we've been talking about dictate.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it. Yeah. And when you open the very first page, she shows this. It says, "Mommy, I miss you. 배가 고파요." There's also
Mm-hmm.
hungry. So I remember this from this book,
Mm-hmm.
from
Mm-hmm.
Lisa Hakkyungja's book. So then I thought, oh no, I shouldn't repeat that,
Mm-hmm.
But so that's how I started erasing it. Then I thought, okay, I'll just sort of erase it, sort of not all the way, but just sort of have it there, kind of faintly.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are people who have read this book might think of it, or yeah, it was just something that it was sort of my own internal sort of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, you don't have to think about dictate for that. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I haven't read the book yet, but I'll be doing it. Well, I asked a lot of questions to you, but I'm sure that people in the audience also have lots of questions to you as poet, translator, but also to your poems. So if you have any question, you can please feel free to ask questions and I will read them out. Also about the Orphan series, after reading and listening to the stories of the war orphans or orphan girls, you decided to, well, re-narrate their stories, which is quite different approach to from what you did with Anaksov's story. Could you tell us the background of this decision?
Yes, I didn't know for a long time. I didn't know what to do with what I had learned about that 1951 massacre of the villagers in this, the southern part of South Korea during the war. But when I went, I was in a writing residency in Marfa, Texas, for about a month, and there is a kind of a Trinity Foundation, and there are permanent installations that artist Donald Judd left, and one of the permanent installations was by that Russian artist Ilya Kabakov, and he kind of recreated this old Soviet Union schoolhouse perfectly. Everything, like the furniture, just the way a school might look like. Then he let it sort of just disintegrate. He didn't want any glasses on the windows, and Marfa is a desert, so the wind, and sand blew in and just basically destroyed the whole installation. So when I walked into that schoolhouse, it was just incredible. I felt as if I had walked into memory. And then there were so many beautiful details that he created. There were like stories by the students, what they were doing at school, what they were repairing. They went to a museum and so forth. The books that they were reading, like fairy tales and so forth. Then I thought about that, and then I realized that he is the artist, Kabakov, actually wrote those stories. Those are also imagined accounts. Then I realized that I could create that imagined accounts for the orphan, the 8 surviving girls as well. That would be a way for time to travel. That I could give that kind of same experience that I had through his installation.
I see.
So with the orphans, I was sort of, I thought, okay, imagination can be a form of translation as well, a way of channeling the past to the present.
Although you said that you imagined the stories, you also researched and you also interviewed the
Yes,
experts who
yes,
interviewed
yes, I
other
did.
orphan children.
Mhm. I did use some, some of the things that the survivors did, in their testimonials as well, and what the researcher Dr. An Kim told me as well, and then together with my own imagined elements.
Now I see that the audience is very interested in what you're doing outside of the book, especially in Germany and as a Picador professor. So one of the question is, how long are you in Germany? So how long have you been here, and how long are you planning to be in Leipzig, for instance?
I'm here until almost end of March.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
And
came.
what topics? Sorry.
What topics am I teaching? I'm teaching for undergraduates. I'm teaching creative writing class, poetry, and then for MA students, for the seminar, we are exploring Asian American poetry in the context of Asian American history.
So in that context, which other poets and authors do you recommend?
Yeah, we have read Dictate by Teresa Hakyang-jak. I highly recommend this book. I can't think of a lot of things now. We read and discussed Ghost of, a Vietnamese American poet, Diana Khoi Nguyen. And we actually also read Kathy Park Hong, Minor Feelings.
And also there are questions about you as a poet and translator. So I'll just read out the question. How would you position yourself in relation to not just poets, but fiction writers as well? When I read your poetry and essays, I'm reminded of Minjung literature. It's kind of folk literature from Korea, South Korea, during the military dictator era. But what about more recent writers who are both Korean and diasporic?
Well, I translate Korean poetry, so I learn a lot. I have learned a lot from their poetic innovations and how they have written groundbreaking poetry, how they broke out of sort of conventional poetry that's expected of women poets. So that has influenced me and has sort of has given me the inspiration to also explore, to write beyond the sort of your conventional poetry. But definitely, I am not. I can't call myself a Korean poet. I'm definitely a Korean. My position is, I'm definitely writing from a diasporic position. So I don't really belong here or there. So, but that position is an important one, I think. I mean, it gives me a different perspective that, that it would be, that's difficult, that would be, that's different from if I were totally submerged or immersed in one place.
In relation to that, there's also another very interesting question. You've written about English being not your second language, but rather your colonial language. How does this relationship impact the translation of your poetry?
Yeah, I mean, I had to think about, I thought about what, my father was educated in Japanese, so he knew more Japanese than Korean, especially like written, so then I had to think about, in terms of, the political and historical relationship that we have with the U.S. English is our another colonial language, and I know that is not really widely perceived idea, but I that's what I think. And so I'm not translating from one neutral language to another neutral language. There is no linguistic neutrality between Korean and English. So I am translating within that historical context. So I have to keep in mind about that relationship. So you have to think really carefully about what you choose to translate and how you read that, your interpretation of the poetry as well as you translate. And also, when I translate, I have to contextualize what I'm translating for the readers, and how I contextualize that also is informed by that position, my perspective that I have about English.
If we go back to the book DMZ Colony, you also spoke about mirror words, and this idea, the idea behind the practice of mirror words is based on Deleuze and Guattari's criticisms or thinkings about language as order words, which has then again a very strong connection to Korean history, where order words literally change the country's fate and people's fate as well over the night. Could you explain more about the mirror words? And especially what I found really interesting was that page 99, when you after explaining the mirror words, and after criticizing the language as the order words, you end this poem with your own order words. Do it again, do it. Is it intended or?
So, yeah, I mean, order words, basically, the way I understood Deleuze and Guattari was that it is a language of power. So, and so what would be language that could defy or resist power. So that's what I sort of
Mhm.
meant by mirror words. Um, um, yes, did you do it again? Do it. Actually, I borrowed that line from my first book.
Ah,
Um,
so yet another reason to read your first book, because now I slowly notice that I missed something for today. Um, can we move on to the series of pictures and then text that you put together in the end of the DMZ Colony? Here you show us the pictures from your childhood, mostly taken by your father, and also here the stories and images and words are flowing together. They're coming together from the whole book, DMZ Colony. At the same time, new words or new ideas, such as from of Frantz Fanon, about the hardship of knowing oneself when one is born in the colonial country, comes along too. And the book ends with the words, "See you at DMZ." There are lots of histories behind these few images and these few sentences, and you were able to experience them more close through this through the conversation with your father, who is also a very strong actor, who is not very visible in this book, in Hardy War. But in Hardy War, he's very present. But in DMZ Colony, he's not that present, but he's still the combining center of the past and present. And you heard the stories of his time and partially also your time. What kind of stories are we going to tell the next generation? What are we witnessing? Is there something that should be translated into the next generation?
that's a difficult question.
Mm.
I, like what we said about all the contemporary history of Korea, because of course many decades of military dictatorship, so much of the certain aspects of the history have been so suppressed and is still suppressed. Um, Even when the researcher Dr. An Kim, they through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of South Korea, even though they uncovered so much military violence and violations of human rights during the dictatorship, even though they have uncovered all those things, it's already locked up again.
Mhm.
So I feel that we still need to keep excavating this history that's been
Mhm.
suppressed. And that's what we need to continue to explore and uncover and expose. And that's otherwise, um, you know, I don't know how we would even have, I mean, future would be kind of meaningless
Mhm.
unless we really understood what took place. Um,
Mhm. You also mentioned tonight that we should be really careful about what we are translating. My question is, did you find something in Germany or during your time in Germany that you want to translate?
I found a lot of things in Berlin while I was in
Mhm.
Berlin. Um,
Mhm.
and they're all going to be in my next book. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So,
Yeah,
and
I'm really looking forward to reading it.
thank you.
Yeah. Is there
Thank you
something
for
that you also want
thank you
to?
for all your
Sorry.
questions. Yeah. Thank you for all your
Mhm.
questions, and also thank you to the viewers who gave us questions too.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your poems and your stories and also your time with us tonight, Domi. It was a great pleasure and also my honor to be able to talk to you.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
thank
and
you
stay
to
sound.
Picador.
Yeah, and I also want to thank you other people engaged in this event. Among others, I also want to appreciate DAAD, University of Leipzig, and also Holzbrink Publishing Company Group for making this event possible. And also warm greeting and thank you to the network partners, Galerie für zeitgenössische Kunst Leipzig, EDIT, Koreanisches Kulturzentrum, and Korea Verband. And also, thank you, Vanessa, Friederike, and Sophie for organizing the event. And last but not least, thanks everyone who joined us tonight. And I wish you a pleasant evening, and I hope you, nice time and stay sound and healthy. Then see you.
Thank you. Bye.